All right. So we have Audra Hazelwood on the podcast today. Welcome back.
Thank you, Greg. It's good to be back. We think our last podcast was in 2021, I think, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly, October of 2021.
yeah, a while ago.
So it's
Um, and then I noticed that you did something on the. Sorry, the dog's back there, always wanting attention. But the last podcast you did was, I think you did an essay on Nietzsche and Kant back in December 2022 on A Philosopher's Guide to the Apocalypse. And I just wanted to kind of get your take on like why you wrote that essay and kind of what went into it and kind of like the main things that you talked about and whatnot. That'd be kind of cool to go over.
oh yeah. Um, well, that was a research project I did
Yeah,
over the summer, between junior and senior year of college. So I wanted to attempt to write like an original bit of philosophy, and I
yeah,
realized one of the things lessons I took from that was it's incredibly hard to write original philosophy.
yeah,
Um, but my reason for that project was primarily to, I guess, investigate, whether philosophy had a role in politics. Because I think a lot of times people think of philosophy as this abstract thing that doesn't bear on reality.
yeah,
Um, but if you look at like the history of philosophy, I feel like many philosophers have been directly or indirectly political or aiming to for some sort of political change, or they've been activists. Um, and when you, I guess another thing that I thought about was like when you think about, I guess, politics in a more cynical fashion, you just think about like uh, power struggles, like Nietzschean power struggles for who's going to dominate.
yeah,
And then I guess you ask yourself, how do you bring some order to that chaos, I guess? How do you bring some uh how do you make sense of that? Is it just pure power struggles, or can you bring some other meaning to that? And so I feel like with philosophy, if you like marry philosophy and politics together, you can uh other sorts of principles to something that other people would say is just pure power struggles.
yeah. So what do you think? Like, how do you think? Like, why do you think people do politics? Why do you think, like, at least most people do? Or like, what are the variations? Like, you know what I mean?
Like, why do people get into politics? Or
Yeah,
uh I mean, I would assume it's for a couple of reasons. I mean, there are people who genuinely want to like change the world, and in a way that might be good or might be bad. I mean, depending on your perspective. And then there are others that see it as kind of a way of advancing, I guess, advancing themselves in the world, getting prestige, getting money, getting influence. Um, I mean, of course, I guess that could change throughout one's career. Like I think we've noticed, or you notice with some career politicians, they start out maybe with more idealistic or more principle driven, but over time they become more cynical or more
a little more cynical.
um or more focused on uh I don't
Like
know how you'd put
power
it. Yeah.
or like money or
They
kind of
become
just,
enmeshed in the
yeah,
power uh struggles themselves, I guess. Um and then their actions don't align with the principles they used to claim they were supporting.
yeah, they kind of like get in and then as soon as they kind of see the reality of it all and kind of just get used to the job and all these people like coming around, they see all the conflicts, things that they could do, all these avenues, all this new information, and they kind of just like get fed along through the machine just like everyone else, basically.
It kind of reminds me like, so I'm taking a class right now. It's actually about a cholera epidemic in
Okay.
London. Um, and one of the main topics in this class is about how uh, there was a lot of evidence that a water pump in a particular neighborhood was causing the epidemic. But the scientific consensus at the time was, I think it was called the miasma theory. It was the airborne, that cholera was airborne, even though there was a doctor who was putting forward a pretty strong case that it was waterborne. Um, and so a lot of these scientists at the time and medical doctors, they just could not see sort of what was in front of them in a way. Not because they were dumb, but because they were like entrenched in that scientific dogma that they had
Yeah.
been, I guess, trained with. I feel like it's kind of similar with politicians. Like, I guess you can go into it more uh optimistic, I guess, or idealistic, but then you become enmeshed in the political dogma or in the institutional dogma, and then it's hard to see past that.
Yeah, especially, to like think past the dogma. I mean, it also takes a little bit of like bravery. You kind of have to stand out. Um, and a lot of people get in prison for doing that, right? Or at least they have in the past, right? Um, so do you think like what's a way? Well, actually, I have this quote. Um, are you familiar with Justin Townes Earl?
I am not actually.
He's a singer, but he has this quote in the song "The Saint of Lost Causes." You know the folks that most afraid of the wolf. If you really stop and think throughout time, between a wolf and a shepherd, who do you think has killed more sheep? And I wanted to ask your thoughts on that. Um, as far as between a wolf and a shepherd, who's killed more sheep?
Hmm.
Like the shepherd being the person who, leads the sheep, tells them, I'm taking care of you, but like, why are you taking care of them to, even just use you and then kill you at the end, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I guess applying that to like political context,
Yeah, in the
I'm
political
trying to figure out who
context.
the wolf would be. I mean, I guess the shepherd would be our leaders or our
Yeah,
politicians and bureaucrats, but I'm trying to figure out who the wolf would be in that metaphor.
I'd say
Um,
the wolf would be like just your fellow person,
mm,
basically, your fellow human beings, just the people that we get kind of um, led against, basically.
hmm. I mean,
Um,
in that case, I would certainly think that whoever is enmeshed in the institutional power structures would be the ones killing more sheep than the
yeah,
average Joe who might be, you know, uh, a a total jerk, but
yeah.
you know, he's less influential in that sense than um an actual world leader or something.
Well, I
Um,
think it's the difference between like direct violence and like indirect violence, where like uh say Exxon isn't killing people in the Amazon, right? Exxon isn't doing that. Their oil is actually just spilling in their lands, and they can't, and then they starve, right? Because they can't farm or anything like that. Whereas if a murderer went and killed like one of them, that murderer would seem to be like eviler than the people who are spilling the oil and not paying them back or paying them for the damages. I don't know.
no, I think that's a good point actually. I mean, we I think we focused on whatever is closest, well,
Yeah.
whatever we're closest to. So um that's why I think we could be fooled, I guess, by our like maybe instincts in that direction. We could be fooled by focusing on the petty criminals or the people who cause us direct harm, not thinking about the institutional harm or the harm that is still affecting us, but it's affecting us in such a in in such a discrete way, or it's years down the line or something that it it doesn't register in the same way. I don't know, maybe that has something to do with like the way humans evolved or something, being used to small tribes, but we're dealing with so many more people than our
Yeah.
ancestors would have.
Yeah, did we talk about overpopulation on um our last episode? I can't remember. I put like Thanos as like the profile picture to it, or like the
You
cover
might have.
photo.
I didn't get a chance to re-listen to it.
Oh yeah, I mean neither did I, but uh yeah, I mean the thing about there being it's kind of like I feel like when things get in these big groups, I feel like there's like an ant mentality. Like if you look at ants and how they interact, I feel like we interact like that when we're in these like giant swaths of people, whereas when we're not, we kind of act more like things roaming the um, just roaming the fields, right? Or like scouring the forests and getting food. But when we're in these big groups, we kind of like it becomes like this pack mentality, or not a pack mentality, but it becomes like there's a queen and then everyone else, basically.
Hmm. Could you elaborate a bit? Like,
Like as people form large groups, it becomes more they start to follow more than become free. They kind of slowly enslave themselves to one leader. Because when you're in a group, like I feel like that mindset takes place and you start doing what everyone else is doing.
mhm.
So if everyone wants to do what everyone else is doing, it's more easy if like a bunch of people follow one person, then a bunch of people are going to follow that person, and you kind of start to look for a leader because all everyone else kind of merges to be kind of the same thing in a sense. Like everyone just gets so similar, and you see those people that stand out, and you start to follow them.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
Yeah, you kind
Um,
of get what I'm saying. And then like when you're a small group, you're like freer. I don't know. What do you think as far as like small groups and giant swaths of people, like as civilization is today?
oh, yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think I'd thought much about that. Um,
It was definitely like a swath of.
I'm
It was like a huge question, but like basically like how do you think your sense of freedom is affected by population size, basically?
I don't know. Maybe I feel like I'm kind of split-minded about it in a sense. I
Okay.
mean, I think I on the one hand, I see what you mean about smaller groups can make you feel more free because I think this is roughly what you're saying, because you have like maybe fewer influences on you, fewer
Yes.
constraints. Like
Yeah.
there's
Fewer
fewer
influences, fewer
chess
constraints.
fewer chess pieces to put
Yeah.
down, so you kind of know what's going on. But at
Yeah.
the same time, I feel like small groups can also be very confining and suffocating, depending on the kind of small group it is, perhaps. Um, so for example, I go to a private, a very small private liberal arts university,
Yeah.
and there's like less than 1,000 students there. And
Okay.
in some sense, I feel like it makes me feel less free, just because I know
Yeah.
everybody there, and it can kind of like be its own little bubble in a sense.
Like you can't be as like anonymous,
Yeah,
right?
you can't be anonymous. Whereas I can see if you're in at a bigger university, say, um, there's more freedom because you can be anonymous, and there's more opportunities to like seek out new people or do new things. So that's why I'm saying, I guess, the idea of freedom in relationship to the number of people around you, I don't think I
Not
have
quite like that.
I'm
Yeah.
on one side or the other on it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, like I see that because in like a small group of people, you know everyone, and you and it's like impossible not to know them or run into them. So like anything that you do will be judged by that small group of people. But if you're in a big group, then you can relatively remain completely anonymous. Like you could hide from everyone. No, you know.
I think Descartes said that in one of his letters when he moved. I think was it to the Netherlands? Um, I think he was like applauding the fact that he was he could be in this city but still be totally anonymous and focused on his like philosophical work, and
Yeah.
but no one would bother him even though he was around technically so many people. He didn't have all these social obligations that he did, when he was social mingling with the aristocrats and whatnot, um, previously.
But well, I mean, if you're also like completely alone though, I mean that's like a different story, because you're obviously like as free as you could possibly be.
Mm.
Um, have you read what's it called? Um, like The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera?
It's on my reading list, but I haven't got around to it yet. No.
Really? Yeah. It's basically about like the concepts of existential lightness and weight, where when you have like more responsibilities, that's existential weight. You're getting weighed down. There's more weight to your decisions. And if you have existential lightness, there isn't any weight to your decisions, basically. You're totally free.
Hmm.
I'm like, so as far as this whole discussion goes about like people feeling free or like following leaders, like how do you think, as far as like feeling existential weight, as far as like having a good life or a good fulfilling life, like do you think people feel more fulfilled when they're weighed down or when they're free?
Hmm. I would say it depends on, in some sense, maybe choosing what weighs you down, um,
Okay.
or having a greater ability to do so. Maybe there's always things that will weigh us down beyond our control, like
Yeah.
family or I don't know,
Food.
paying taxes or something. Um,
Yeah.
but like if you minimize the stuff that weighs you down that you don't have control over, then I guess you can look for like, because I think Nietzsche says this somewhere. I don't know if I've repeated this quote on your podcast, but something to the effect of, um, tell me like your ruling passion, or tell me what like controls you, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I think that's right. Like, we probably can't, uh, or I guess I put it like this, going back to something you said earlier about the person who's alone being like totally free. In some sense, um, I'm not sure that's quite accurate because, like,
Okay.
in some sense, you could argue like to be anything, you have to have like a surrounding social world. You have to have some like connection or some
Mhm.
someone to bounce ideas off of, or to like someone else to
Mhm.
check your perceptions or check your ideas.
Yeah.
Um, but that's already
So,
like tying you down, right? That's already like a form of bondage, I guess.
mhm.
But maybe like a necessary form of bondage to like to to flourish at all. I mean, you hear these stories about feral children who like had no contact with other people or minimal contact, and you know when they're like rescued or taken back to civilization, then they seem to have like real troubles.
so yeah, like people in solitude when they kind of come back to civilization, they basically go crazy. Do you think in our modern society are we becoming more like isolated, like from other people, or do you think we're like, because like I feel like a lot of people kind of stay in their homes and everything's online now, so I feel like a lot of people are feeling very isolated, especially like with stuff like TikTok. Like you could easily get persuaded, you know, but to like do anything when you're just like sitting on an app that like basically knows your mind better than you do. You know what I mean? So it's like it's crazy how when there's so many people, you can still just be alone. I guess. I don't know.
I mean, I think we probably are more alone than ever. I mean, I'd like to think we could use like the internet or like TikTok. We could use these tools in maybe better ways to not be
Yeah.
lonely, to build community or build connection or because I feel like, the internet has definitely helped me to do that, to find more like-minded people that weren't in the general
Yeah.
vicinity. Um, but I think if you're just like scrolling to pass the time or scrolling because
Yeah.
you're depressed, you're doing it to fill some, you know, void, such a way that's not like, I guess, related to human connection. Um, that's I think when you get like the severe like loneliness and isolation. Um, I don't know if there's a way of distinguishing between like pseudo connection and real connection, but it'd be something
Pseudo
like
connection and real connection. What do you mean by that?
well, the difference between like what we're doing right now, like
Okay. Yeah.
recording a podcast versus like having 2 billion Facebook friends, I guess. Like
Yeah.
I feel like the 2 billion Facebook friends is like the kind of thing that makes you feel isolated because you can't have
Yeah.
that many friends. But like starting a podcast and like
Yeah.
recording it with uh, uh various making friends and connections through that is like a positive way. Like you're using the internet to build connections in a positive way that you can actually maintain.
Yeah. Um, yeah, because when you like build connections, I think that also creates a sense of like existential weight though. Like you know what I mean? Um, or at least it can. Like when you have friendships, there's like you almost get more responsibilities, I guess,
Hmm.
because you have a responsibility to maintain those friendships. You also have a responsibility to like not be douchebag, right? So
Do you feel like this is reflected in your own like experience or um
yeah, no, like I for sure. I feel like when you like know more people, it, more pressure kind of builds up on you in a sense, or at least it can. I mean, maybe that's just me, but
no. I mean, I don't think it's just you because
yeah,
like I think I've noticed this with like bigger friend groups. Like I feel like there's particularly pressure in those situations. Like if it's just 2 or 3 people, then it might be much more low stakes. But when you get 5, 6, 7 people in a group, then there's more pressure because you're kind of like
yeah,
trying to do 4D chess in your head, like thinking about everyone's needs and likes and dislikes. Um, or maybe that's just, social anxiety. But
yeah,
uh, the more people you're dealing with, I guess, the more you have to try to, I guess, empathize, perhaps, which
yeah,
is very like draining and confusing. Um, and you're just the more people, I guess, you're associating with, the more, possibilities for mistakes or um, making annoying someone or making them angry or something. Um,
yeah.
so no,
Social anxiety is a weird one. It's like you're literally afraid of people. Like I mean, I get social anxiety all the time. Like it's weird because it's literally just being afraid of people. That's
yeah,
it's like that's what it is. It's kind of like it's weird because, but you're also it's not being afraid of people. It's getting afraid of good people. Like you know what I mean? Because you're not going to be socially anxious around a murderer. You're just going to be scared, right? So it's like you like want people to like. I feel like there's a big validation culture in our society. Like we want people to like us.
hmm.
Um, and like I don't know. Like what do you think about that? As far as like, have you ever thought about that? How there's just like I feel like people nowadays they just want everyone to like them, I guess, and they're just afraid of people disliking them.
I think there's like two kind of like forces going on. I guess like
Okay.
there's that strain that you're talking about. The I want everyone to like me and I want to be friends with everyone. But also, like, for example, like you mentioned TikTok earlier. I've noticed on TikTok there's a lot of creators who are like, you don't owe anybody anything, you need to like spend a bunch of alone time so you can befriend yourself. Like,
Oh,
um there's like two
yeah,
kinds of, I don't know. I feel like we people can't really make up their mind. Like, do they want everyone to like them or do they want to be like hyper individualistic and self-sufficient?
yeah, yeah. No, I feel that. Yeah, I feel like it's hard to like. I feel like people are trying to balance the two, and I think in a sense that's the lightness and weight. Because when you're totally individualistic, you're like super light. But when you're when you want everyone to like you, that's like that's a weight. That's a heavy weight. Wanting to get everyone to like you because I mean, like not everyone's gonna like you, right? So it's like I think that's what I think that's a big thing. But wanting people to like you, I feel like it's a good thing. I don't know, it, at least in a sense.
I mean, it encourages you to, I guess, attempt to be your best self. Um,
Yeah,
but like I said earlier, I mean, I think it could also be a big weight to be totally alone. Um, like I think um that lack of the other like really just could destroy someone mentally. Like that's why I think solitary confinement is so like
mhm,
deadly to people.
yeah,
Um, so it's like they're at both ends, the connect like the social pressure or or the isolation. There's a lightness and a heaviness about both of them, I guess. I don't know. I hate to be that like, oh, the answer's in the middle, because sometimes that sounds like you're cheating. But in this situation, I
no,
feel like there has to be some middle ground between like being self-sufficient enough, but having enough connections with the outside world. Um,
do you, so do you think that do you think um like anything happens like say when you're away from people for a while like how do you think that affects your consciousness as far as like not having all that stimulation of other people?
I feel like it can. I mean, it can clarify or like calm you. Um, it can block out certain noise that's
Yeah.
unnecessary and just confusing. Um,
Mhm.
but I think if you're totally isolated or um, cut off from people for some reason, then I think you would probably just go crazy because I think you'd start to question your perceptions.
Yeah.
Uh, just that constant internal dialogue with yourself, I feel like kind of just unless maybe you already have like a certain a way to ground yourself or a certain like a very coherent sense of self. I feel like that can like cause people to unwind and
Yeah.
start um experiencing probably serious mental health problems. um
Yeah. Just like hearing yourself talk 24/7, basically.
yeah, and like I said earlier, I mean, you don't have anyone to like to double check you, I guess. So if I'm worried that I'm like misunderstanding a situation, I might say, "Hey, Greg, I'm having this issue. What do you think about it?" And if you like agree or disagree with me, that helps me like evaluate my own
Your
perceptions.
decision.
But if
Yeah.
it's just me, then you know, or if I start, and if it's just me and I like start to question my perceptions, then, you know, who do I go to? I can't go to anyone. It's just me. And so that would like
Yeah.
that's like a self-reinforcing sort of mechanism. If you're totally alone and then you start to question yourself, then you're just it all unravels.
Yeah. And I mean, even think like small isolated groups also can go crazy too. Like just being isolated from everyone else can kind of like make you just, I don't know, just go off your rockers. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah.
cults.
Cults, you say?
Cults, like, yeah, small
Yeah.
isolated groups of people. I feel um like a cult would be a good example of that, where just like a small isolated group of people kind of start to follow a leader, they kind of stop communicating with the outside world, things like that.
Yeah,
Especially if it's
that's like
run
the
by one
issue.
crazy person.
That's like the issue of solitary confinement writ large to a group in a way. You're
Yeah.
confined to the group's way of thinking, and that
Yeah.
isolates you from any other way of thinking.
Hmm. No, like I think that can be dangerous, especially today when there's so much information out there that it's just I feel like it's really easy to kind of be swallowed into like one spot. Because especially on your computer, it's not like you can have a million views all on your one screen, right? But if you're out in the real world, like talking to people, that's when you'll hear the most views or like the most different points of view, basically. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is probably common knowledge, but a lot of people nowadays talk about how, with the algorithm, um, we're more cut off from opposing points of view because the algorithm just keeps reinforcing what it knows we'll like.
Yep.
Um, and so, that can inhibit like critical thinking skills and um,
Hmm.
can cause you to swallow misinformation much easier.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I noticed that I've been like listening to certain videos, and I'll be like, at first I'm like, okay, okay, and then I'm like, wait a minute, that didn't make any sense. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's he's contradicting himself, You're like whatever. But yeah, it's like you gotta be careful because like on the few times that I've gone on TikTok, like I'll make videos and I usually just delete TikTok off my phone because I don't want to get swallowed in, right? And um, on the few times I've been on there, like I've had some, like videos with like the quotes, like then things to do if like when. So it'd be like these weird ones that like, no, like that's not true. Like, no, that's a terrible thing to do. Like, um, I don't know. It's like I feel like you, I feel like you could definitely do some damage to people, like somewhere down the line. What do you think about the ban? They're trying to ban it.
Uh, I mean, I think the we definitely have, or many people have, like an unhealthy relationship with the internet.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's like it does pay. This is a caveat at the beginning. I think it does pay to like reflect on, um,
Mhm.
you know, I guess, well, not only just our personal relationships with the internet, but how do we want society to deal with the internet? Do we
Yeah.
want it, you know, so decentralized that no one company can take it over? Do we want it run, you know, do we want it centralized, run by the government, or how do we want it more of a free for all? Um, but I guess I'm not convinced that the reasons given for banning TikTok are very persuasive reasons. Um, I think it has more to do with a current trend that is just fear of like Chinese competition. Not to say China's, you know, a great country that
Yeah.
um we
Yeah. No,
should
I mean,
all
I totally
love,
get
but
you. Yeah.
um I think that's the probably a big part of it.
Yeah.
And
I
I
mean,
think
we also
I
just
think
need the
that kind of,
freedom.
well,
I don't
exactly.
know.
I think it should concern us if a government wants to ban an app just because it's from a Chinese company.
Yeah.
That makes me like, I think that that's a step towards, I mean, the Orwellian metaphor is
Yeah.
overused, but it's a step towards a more, the government controlling people's intake of information more and more,
Mhm.
which,
Yeah.
you know, even given the great amount of misinformation on the internet, I'm still skeptical of any like bureaucrat that says you shouldn't consume this media.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, no, I agree. Um, like sure, sure, they're selling the data to the Chinese government. Okay. But but we have the freedom to use it anyhow, right? I mean, freedom of speech, right? And we need different platforms to speak on. So we have the freedom to use that, therefore, right? Um, but of course, like, what if, we were using these things and for some reason they cause like violence and death for whatever reason? And then, like, but we had to talk on it, but for some reason, when we were talking on it, when people were publishing things, what if people randomly died because of it? I
I mean,
think
I
that
guess I
kind of,
would.
I don't
Oh,
know.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, this also made me think about like, so you remember the Charlie Hebdo shooting? Um, I was just like in my mind, I was like taking out in your argument, I was taking out TikTok and putting in that magazine.
Yeah.
What if these cartoons cause a terrorist attack? Like, should we ban these or should we suppress these or these like cartoons criticizing Islam because it could cause violence? Um, and I didn't find that particularly persuasive in that situation. So I feel like it's kind of a similar situation. Um,
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Um, like, but it's kind of that goes back to that indirect harm and direct harm thing also. Is that like any indirect harm, like we usually let it fly because it's indirect. There's no like clear cause or reason. It's kind of unclear. And in that sense, I think there's a lot of like indirect harm in our civilization than it was, say, thousands of years ago, at
oh,
least done by
definitely.
other
I mean,
people.
yeah, there's just so many more people and so many more like like there's so many different types of relationships people have with
Yeah,
each other that they didn't have a couple thousand years ago.
100%. And I don't know. Do you ever like read into any philosophy like Carl Jung?
I I have not read Carl Jung yet, no. I should. He's also on my list.
Yeah, so like, but have you heard of archetypes? Like what an archetype is?
I have, yes.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that as far as do you think archetypes kind of exist within this generalized consciousness, or do you think we kind like do you think they're in our DNA almost to see? I don't know.
They probably are like a reflection of like a mythic reflection of just various aspects of the human personality.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe specific cultural manifestations of the innate human nature
Yeah,
in all of us.
yeah. There's kind of these reflections. I don't know. Do you ever like study dreams at all? Like like the things you dream about and how that relates to your subconscious and whatnot?
I think a lot about dreams. And I've read a little bit of Sigmund Freud's work, and he, of course, was
Okay.
one of the great pioneers of dream analysis.
You majored in psychology,
Philosophy.
philosophy? Did you study psychology at all?
Uh, Not formally, but I'm kind of a amateur. I'm a layman interested in psychology. Uh,
Yeah, I feel that. I can't remember if you were doing econ or like with philosophy or something like that. I don't remember, but it's been a while. But
I don't think I could tell you. My college trajectory has been rather confusing. I've had a
Yeah,
couple
I'm
majors
sure.
along I've had a couple majors along the way. I think I probably had psychology at some point before I settled on philosophy, which I think is a better fit for me overall.
So like what do you think about the whole like what are your thoughts on the current state of the education system in America as far as people having to basically go to college to make money?
Um, I mean, I don't think a liberal arts education was ever really intended for people to make money. Um,
Yeah,
I think it was
I
intended
agree.
just to create like well-rounded, literate individuals who could like given certain tools, then they could go off and write an opera or study physics or do whatever they wanted to on their own.
Hmm.
Um, but in our world of like specialization, um, and given that uh, as you say, that it's more job focused nowadays. You get that degree to get a well-paying job.
Hmm.
I think that decreases the quality of a liberal arts education. Um, or at the very least, it misleads people into thinking that, you know, studying ancient languages is going to get you a job.
Yeah.
I mean, it might. It might if your job is
No.
focusing on those
Yeah.
languages, but um,
Well, you follow
I-
your passions, right? I mean,
yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of stuff.
exactly.
Yeah.
But people complain or students complain. I mean, I know I've complained, about all the various requirements you have to jump through. Oh, you have to have a science credit, a math credit, a history credit, and you're like, when am I going to use any of this? This is all nonsense, or it's at least not relevant to a job. And it's like, well, in some ways that's correct, unless that's your passion, you're probably not going to use various things and that you've studied in school in a job. Um,
Yeah, I mean it's important to not kind of worry about the things that you can buy as much as the things that you can do. I don't know, in my opinion. Just because I mean, like stuff isn't going to fulfill like make you feel good. It's just stuff, right? Like a rock doesn't fulfill you anyway, but the things that you do like to that rock might fulfill you, I guess.
oh
If you're
yeah.
like writing on the rock or doing creating a fire with the rock or whatever you're doing with the rock. I don't know.
Um, yeah, more and more, and this sounds kind of cheesy, but more and more, I feel like fulfillment really comes from, um, well, not only action, but I guess like, um, your relationship with, I guess, your inner self and how that relates to your actions, and less about like how much money you earn or what kind of car you drive or or whether or not you have like a romantic partner or whatever, like all these
Mhm.
external things that people focus on. It's the key to happiness, say, is much simpler.
Yeah, it's like, the key to happiness isn't a narrow line like people say. It's very I mean, well, I mean in a sense it is. Just follow your heart, right? But like what makes one person happy is gonna make another person. Don't work like that. Have you ever read The Stranger?
I have. It's the by Albert Camus, you mean?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite novels of all time.
No, same here. It's good. I mean, there's a reason why it had a Nobel Prize, right? Did, so like what do you think of like freedom as far as like the stranger, like in that book? Like do you think like the stranger? was more or less free than everyone else, I guess, being a stranger to everyone else.
Uh, I mean, I guess relating it to, my earlier argument, I think he was less free and like maybe the kind of freedom that is like desirable in a sense.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to think of like how to distinguish like I don't know, say there's like freedom in the state of nature, then there's like social freedom. Maybe if I can clarify those terms if they don't make sense. But um and like the stranger, maybe he has like the kind of freedom from the state of nature perspective. Um
What
you
do you
sort of
mean by that?
remove sorry.
Like state of nature? What do you mean by state of nature?
I mean like the kind of freedom you would have, I don't know, that like a primitive man had, say, or like a caveman, the kind of freedom a caveman has, I guess, or the kind of freedom you would have maybe if you're on a desert island or like in a scenario where you're focused on just like survival.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I see what you mean.
versus like the freedom in society to like work however you want and all that good stuff. Um,
Yeah.
I think the stranger was like he was removed enough from people, I guess, like mentally to sort of return to almost like uh a the freedom he might find in a state of nature, which is why he like commits a crime, I guess in a sense, like he's no longer feeling the imposition of like the social forces upon him. Um,
Yeah.
but of
I
course that
mean,
doesn't end well for him.
yeah, I mean there's that part in there where he like aims at the guy and then he shoots him 4 times, and then there's a quote. He says something along the lines of it was like knocking 4 times on the door of unhappiness. So it's interesting to see because it seems like he's emotionless, but really there's kind of a deeper like layer to that. Like, oh, this guy does get unhappy. He gets sad. He gets lonely. He has all these different emotions as you kind of go through it.
But it's also like very, I mean, his like I guess detachment from the world
Yeah.
is, at least for me, it's relatable in a way.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Most relatable book I've ever read. Like shit. At least at
like
the time
like
that I
I
was reading it.
yeah, I mean I maybe I'm not entirely out of that angsty teenage phase, but
Yeah.
like I feel like a lot of people, or when I look at a lot of people, I feel like in their like in the way they go through the world, it feels like they get it to me in a way that I don't.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
and
yeah, 100%.
I don't know if that's like I don't know. Sometimes occasionally I've subscribed that to like oh they don't think about it, they just do it, whereas philosophers think about it, and so that in like
Hmm.
halts action in a
Yeah.
sense, which changes
Yeah.
your relationship with the world. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, and just like thinking about stuff, it takes so much time. Like I know some just so forgetful, because I'm constantly just thinking about all these things, and it's like, man, most people they don't have this. They turn the stove top off before they leave, right? Like,
um, but yeah, I maybe yeah. So maybe it's because I think more about things than the average person. Um, but I think that does create a sort of distance between yourself
yeah,
and other people.
yeah. I feel like kind of constantly being in your head. I mean, you kind of get isolated doing that just in and of itself. And you kind of go a little crazy just because if you're always kind of like thinking to yourself a lot, you're not really seeing people that much, it kind of just makes you kind of, I don't know, just go a little crazy.
Oh yeah. Um, but at the same time, I feel like I can't stop doing it, you know? Like it's my
Yeah,
nature.
same.
It's how I'm supposed to be. Like
Yeah, no, I
whoever
agree.
like created the world or whatever is like created me this way, and I'm just
Yeah,
being the best version of me I can be, even if
yeah,
it
and
means
that's all you
I'm
can
like
do.
seem more distant from other people or
Yeah, but I mean, it's not like I don't think we're really meant to be in giant groups of people, though. It's kind of nice to have just a few friends. Because I feel like we're still tribal in a sense. Yeah,
oh, absolutely. Um, I think a lot of our issues come from, you know, we're living in a world that we didn't evolve to
yeah, to be
uh
in.
to be in, which doesn't mean it's a bad world. It just means our brains and bodies don't know how to respond to certain things.
Yeah, just like
Um,
changing really fast and because of us. It's so weird. It's so weird to think like how our world is changing so much, like because of us or like the whole world itself.
like I think
Uh,
I'm reminded of a bit of psychology I learned recently.
mhm,
Apparently the mind isn't um or physiologically, I should say. Like the body, it feels the same in or it can't distinguish between like a real event or imaginary event. So if I'm
yeah,
tell you something, if I talk about a situation that would make you anxious if you were in
mhm,
it, just thinking about it will make you anxious.
yeah,
And I feel like that's like maybe part of people's issue with the internet, why they have such an unhealthy
mhm,
relationship. If they have a certain,
yeah,
um, I don't know, like it's like how the news always focuses on negative stories over positive stories. It's like if you
yeah,
constantly have those hearing those negative stories from media outlets or from social media, then it's like your body is having that same response of, oh no, like we're gonna have a recession, or oh no, the republic is collapsing, or whatever's like, getting under someone's
yeah.
skin. Um, they feel as if it's happening, even if it isn't technically happening. Um, which isn't really it's not adaptive for like um acting in the best possible way.
No, I agree. And I feel like when you're exposed to like things that make you afraid, it makes you much more easily controllable as far as like if you're afraid, you'll just follow the leader basically because you're looking for someone to help you. And I think that can be a really dangerous thing, especially today with all like the fear on social media and just like the news and whatnot.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think like I mean, I haven't been around for too many presidential elections, but I feel like every presidential election that rolls around, people are saying,
Yeah.
this is the most important presidential election. This is a historic moment. It's going to change the course of history. Um, and I don't know. I always feel like it's the same dog and pony show every time. Not to say it doesn't
Great.
matter who's president, but it's that like this feeling of like, oh, this is going to be apocalyptic if it goes one way or the other is like, I don't
Hmm.
know. I think people overemphasize like
Yeah.
or I think when
Events.
you instill fear in people, then it's like I guess it's a logical conclusion to be like, oh no, this election is going to like you know make or break the world depending on what happens when it
Yeah.
probably won't.
It's like you guys are just trying to get us to vote. Yeah. Hey, I feel like it's like a good place to end it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on again. I'm glad you
Yeah.
reached out.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. That was fun. I'll probably get this out like in a couple weeks. I'm gonna post my next like stranger video first, but
Are you doing a series on The Stranger? Or
Yeah, just like a 2-part series. So
that's cool. I plan to get back into podcasting when after I graduate. I've just been so swamped.
yeah, you should.
But I
Yeah,
gotta get that degree first. Then I'll have more
yeah,
time.
yeah. It's Philosopher's Guide to the Apocalypse. It's perfect for um, just like yeah, because like we're getting so afraid of stuff. Like, hey,
A
here's some
little tongue in
philosophy.
cheek, yeah.
Calm down. There isn't an apocalypse.
Exactly.
Yeah, but all right. Well, take it easy.